Hey, everybody, welcome back to Volcus Mystica, where we delve into the mysterious and the magical aspects of the unseen world. All right, so today we're going to be talking about some hot points, some hot topics. Um, and I want to get into the practical elements of this instead of it just being opinion based and talking about the current state of things. I want to really dig deep into what we can do with these tools, with this technology, so that we're not falling behind in the process. Eh, Whenever a technology comes out, the early adopters are the ones who get to curve how it comes about, right? The people who are invested in it are the people that direct the flow of that technology. And the people who accept it last are the people who just have to accept what comes about with that technology. As occultists, as witches, magicians, all our various titles, we have a unique opportunity, I think, to steer the ship in some ways, at least in regards to how it works for us in our praxis. Um, and of course, what we're talking about today is technomancy and the rise of AI and all the various tools.
It's very scary. Technomancy.
It threatens tradition, man. It threatens all these different systems, and that's what I think makes it so fascinating from a philosophical perspective. Is it is shaking up industry after industry after industry, and it's scaring a lot of people too. And I think that the intersection of fear and technology at that nexus, there's opportunity for really, really incredible things to come about. And of course, we'll get into some of the ethical considerations, those sorts of things too. But more important than that is what can we utilize to to do to do straight magic with these tools, because that's what it is to me. It is a tool, and a tool is neither good nor bad. How I use it is, and we as magicians know this, right? My wand, my dagger, not necessarily inherently any one way or the other, right? They both can be used for destruction or construction. One may be more well suited for cutting than the other, but ultimately the tool is neither morally good nor bad. And so the application of these tools in our praxis, how can we do this? What is it that we can do um, to harness the power for our own personal praxis and also for the great work of helping, the larger world? I think I want to start out by reading a little bit of a piece from Ovid's Metamorphoses. And this ties into a piece that I did on Magic Social about the character Daedalus from Greek mythology. So I'll just read this off just to kind of set the tone, and then we'll get into this, and I want to get your opinion on things as well, of course. But Daedalus abhorred the Isle of Crete, and his long exile on that sea-girt shore increased the love of his own native place. Though Minos blocks escape by sea and land, he said, the unconfined skies remain, though Minos may be lord of all the world, his scepter is not regent of the air, and but that untried way is our escape. This said, he turned his mind to arts unknown and nature unrevealed. He fashioned quills and feathers in due order, deftly formed from small to large, as any rustic pipe from straw's unequal slants. He bound with thread the middle feathers, and the lower fixed with pliant wax, till so, in gentle curves arranged, he bent them to the shape of birds. While he was working, his son Icarus, with smiling countenance and unaware of danger to himself, perchance would chase the feathers, ruffled by the shifting breeze, or soften with his thumb the yellow wax, and by his playfulness retard the work his anxious father planned. But when at last the father finished it, he poised himself, and lightly floating in the winnowed air, waved his great feathered wings with bird-like ease, and likewise he had fashioned for his son such wings. Before they ventured into the air, he said, "My son, I caution you to keep the middle way, for if your pinions dip too low, the waters may impede your flight, and if they soar too high, the sun may scorch them. Fly midway. Gaze not at the boundless sky, far Ursa Major and Boots next, nor on Orion with his flashing brand, but follow my safe guidance." As he spoke, he fitted on his son the plumed wings with trembling hands, while down his withered cheeks the tears were falling. Then he gave his son a last kiss, and upon his gliding wings assumed a careful lead, solicitous. As when the bird leads forth the tender young from high-swung nest to try the yielding air, so he prevailed on willing Icarus, encouraged and instructed him in all the fatal art. As he waved his wings, looked backward on his son. Beneath their flight, the fisherman, while casting his long rod, or the tired shepherd leaning on his crook, or the rough plowman, as he raised his eyes, astonished, might observe them on the wing, and worship them as gods. And I'll stop there. It kind of goes on, but most of us know the myth is that Icarus, in his exuberance, his youth, his passion for this amazing experience, look, we're flying like the gods, flies too close to the sun, and the wax melts, and the wings fall apart, and Icarus is no more. And that is very poignant imagery for the state of technology in general. And that's really what I think the myth is about. Daedalus is in many myths. He builds the labyrinth for King Minos to hold the mighty Minotaur. He is also known as a sculptor that is so adept in his art that the sculpted pieces are said to be alive themselves. They're said to be literally stepping out of the marble before your eyes. And this is so accurate to what we're dealing with the emergence of artificial intelligence and how it is completely reshaping what we think, right? The Daedalus myths are cautionary tales, but they're also a tale of the ingenuity and creativity of the human race. Daedalus was not supposed to be able to do any of this. In fact, like, the people watching him in awe were almost fearful of his brilliance, of his ability to bring forth these wonders that were somewhat akin to the gods. And I can't help but think that that's exactly where we are now with this technology, much like it was with the internet. I mean, the internet itself was one of those awe-striking things, and now we just take it as, that's just, it's just the internet. It's where we are. But
I have an advantage in my appreciation for the internet and how it's changed over the years due to my longevity.
Please share.
Because I was there when it was really cool that this one kid in high school built his own computer. That was amazing. He was a genius, but he happened to be a genius. But it was just amazing that he built his own computer. There was no internet at the time. Not as we know it. The government had access to it. Some schools had access to it, and I'd read a few articles in, I think, Popular Science about it. But the internet did not exist for public use. And you could get a computer, you could buy a computer, but it cost a fortune, and realistically, it had very little power. It was capable of processing data at a low level, at a very low level. So it was an advanced, basically they were advanced calculators and advanced word processors and simple game machines. And those of you who have gotten dysentery understand how powerful they were. Okay?
Oh, good old Oregon Trail.
There you go. But now, it's not just something you can go and when you first had access to it, you could go to school and use it. Or you could eventually go to the library and use it. But you didn't normally have it at home. Now it's integrated in every moment of our life. these intelligence suckers that we carry everywhere we go, that you can't get rid of it. I have to have it near, or I'm uncomfortable, because I might miss something that's actually important, and I get convinced that other things are important on a regular basis when they're not. And if you don't have a place that you can go where these are not allowed, you need to find one. I promise you, you'll have a change of heart of how these things work. I go out to the farm, I gotta leave it in a basket. I can't take it into the farm, right? So there's two good reasons for that. One, I don't ever have to try and find it in the mud. And two, I get to focus on what I'm doing, whether that's magic or crafting or farming, whatever it is. So these are things that are a blessing. Having gone through that whole spectrum, in the very beginning of that, I was home on leave from the Marine Corps, and this woman had her cash card at an ATM and didn't know how to operate it. She had no idea how to use that card, but the banks were closed and she needed $20. Right? So think about being at that point. Think how helpless you are if none of that stuff worked and you need $20. The ATM's rolled down and you need $20. Think how helpless you are.
Cash is a good idea to have on hand, kids. Even though if we're in that dire strait, cash is probably not going to do you dick all because nobody cares about it.
Oh, well, yeah. If we're in an actual, apocalyptic level emergency, then you've got a good fire starter there. But
exactly.
Doesn't matter what denomination. But right now, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about being able to get enough gas to get home, or something like that. And so these are things that I've had the opportunity to see change. And fortunately, my praxis normally doesn't limit me to pure ritual. Some people it does. So using these tools to me is an advantage, provided they don't strip me like you mentioned. They don't cause me to lose sight of how high I am and melt my wings. And that's a problem. You can fly too high with these things and lose your power, lose your ability to fly and soar. And so I think that's my biggest concern for most people. Myself on occasion too. Be honest.
But that's just it, right? That's the gift of technology and the curse of it. Is it's within the use of things. And I think you can see it throughout history, and I spoke about this in my piece, that when the printing press came out, people were afraid of that technology. People were in the 17th, 18th century, there was an idea that reading too many books would rot your brain. Right? There's this idea that, if you read all those books, you won't be grounded in reality. Well, okay, maybe not your reality. Maybe some people get a little bit flighty by reading too many books. It's not the fault of books. That's the fault of the use of the tool. You have the same
problem with Harry Potter. So they may have been onto something.
I mean, it's true of any technology, right? We feared electricity when it first came out. You have the fear campaigns of Edison versus Tesla, where they are literally electrifying or electrocuting people or dogs in some cases, or a horse. I think it depends on the story that you get, to prove that alternating current is too dangerous to put in houses. And so there's a few things that I think that are important for us to examine. The fringes of this fear or acceptance are not necessarily the best gauge for what is really happening and or what will eventually come from it. There's a great deal of fear of misinformation campaigns. There's a great deal of fear and anger towards intellectual theft. These various AI models are trained on people putting their stuff online, right? So if your images, your words, anything's online, it's essentially up for grabs. And that is upsetting a lot of people. And it is making them resistant to the technology in such a way that they're no longer open to the opportunity at all. And I see this a lot with people and the way that they interact with it. They're boycotting anyone who uses it, anyone who has used it in the past. I've seen certain people say, I won't have anything to do with it for some political reason or for some moral or ethical reason. They won't do it. And it's a limiting attitude, right? In my opinion. And that's just my opinion. So it's not necessarily, how do I say this? I don't necessarily think it's a good gauge of reality and or what the tool can do for us if we find ways to do so. If you close yourself off from a piece of technology entirely, like you said in the woman who can't even use the cash card, you're limiting your ability as a magician, as a witch, to explore some of these things about yourself. In my opinion. Again, everybody's going to have their own particular opinion on the matter. But I think it's fascinating, and I think that this fear-driven mindset is dangerous for a lot of reasons. As occultists, as people who, at least vocally, publicly online, declare that we're kind of an awakened group of people, we have a responsibility to engage with these technologies instead of just straight boycott them. Boycotting doesn't work. It's not going to stop the technology from being interlaced into everything. Just because you don't use it, you'd have to stop everyone from using it for them to stop implementing the technology.
Well,
and so
you saw that with the Luddites. The Luddites weren't afraid of technology. They knew what was going to happen when that technology came online. They were all going to be out of work, right? Yep. and that's what happened because they couldn't shut it all down. That was the thing. And a lot of people say Luddites were afraid of technology. That is not the case at all. They were afraid of the results, which we're seeing yet again. I'm staying totally out of the politics of it. California, McDonald's is going digital, man. McDonald's is trying to get the robot technology together to do the job because they don't wait just $20 an hour there. And it's just they cannot afford. They say they cannot afford to pay their employees. I don't know if that's true. I'm not saying it is or it is not.
Right.
I have no idea. I'm saying they say that they can't afford to pay their employees $20 an hour and put out McDonald's Big Macs all day long. So they're investing heavily in the technical side of that. So we see that. Now, how that applies to magic, I see a lot of kids just whipping things out on their phone, not understanding what they're doing. And while I think it may work, okay, because again, these are just tools. And the real magic is between your ears or in your heart or in your ass, whatever. I don't know if I can say that. But depends on your practice, right?
Right. If you're Crowley or not.
Yes. But I think that most of them have not practiced via their praxis the art of sigil work enough to understand and implement what they're actually doing.
True.
We'll probably talk about that later. I think they're skipping a step.
I think there is that danger, and that's inherent in this. One of the strengths of the artificial intelligence, and really what we're talking about here, is machine learning. It's not even necessarily intelligent. The technology is misnamed, I think, and I think there's reasons for that. There's narratives being passed around, But really what we're talking about is machine learning. It's machines attempting to learn through base algorithms how humans think or what they see or how they speak. And so it's machine learning, and its major strength in my own experience is in accelerating workflow, right? So if I'm using ChatGPT or any other AI language generator, what it's doing is not replacing what I eventually have to do. But what it can do, because it can't do that. It'll get scrubbed. Most people will notice that it's AI generated because it has tells, right? You can't just like generate something and then just throw it up. Like you can't. That's not what it's good for, and it's not good at doing
to us. Or me, and you caught it. I put an article I put up on Magic Social, and I just put it into to change the spelling, or not spelling, the punctuation. And it rewrote the whole first chapter. And you pointed that out, that the first chapter looked like it was written by AI. And I didn't bother to check it because it's just it's just a blurb, and it didn't have that much meat in it. It's introducing the ideas, and I went down into the meat of it and looked, and that didn't look like them. But and at first I was embarrassed, right? Because I should have checked that. That was my responsibility. But we published it anyway, so y'all can figure out which article that was. Read them all.
I mean, the thing is it's everywhere now, right? And so there's no escaping it. And so I think, and this is one of the things in my own line of work in the mundane world, I saw that it wasn't going anywhere. And so I was like, okay, I've got to learn how to use these tools to keep up. It's a new tool set, and it's a tool set that people are going to need to know how to use in order to operate within the confines of the new world. And so much of our community as occultists is online now. So if you want to operate in the spaces of the online world, if you want to create community, if you want to be a talking head, like we're attempting to be here on this, you've got to use the tools everybody else is using, or you're going to get passed by. And I think that's also applicable to magic, right? So I got really good at using the technology. I wouldn't say I've mastered it yet, but I've probably spent 5,000-10,000 hours somewhere in that range, on either using the AI image generators, prompting them, seeing how they work, and or using the outputs. And the same thing with language generators to quicken a workflow. Write me an outline based on what I've just said. And it helps. It really does help to either organize or quicken a thought process. So in ideation, it's really good. But you still have the human thing that you have to do, right? And I think that's relevant in the case of how we operate as magicians as well. I have my tools. I have my tool set. But just because I have a wand doesn't mean I set it down and I don't do any of the work anymore. I still have to be a major part of the process, if not the most major part of the process. I have to, even though I think that some pieces of our magical toolkit have their own persona, they have their own energetic imbuements. They're not just dead matter. In my opinion, there's an animistic quality to it, and there always has been in my practice. My wands, they have names. Exactly. Everything has that, and so it's a symphony. It's a dance between you and your sets of tools. And so I kind of laugh at the members of the community, not as like a haha, you're so stupid laugh, but like I feel like we're being too emotive in our approach to this tool if you are either 100% for it or 100% against it. Because there's dangers to the usage, and there are some ethical considerations to the usage that you have to deal with on your own, right? And at the same time, there's tremendous opportunity for us to not only streamline parts of our practice, but unveil new things for ourselves. And this is, I think, before we hit record on this, we were talking a little bit about it. And in the piece that I wrote on Magic Social, I was talking about how AI mirrors our own cognitive processes. Our brain does what it does by collecting data through the sense organs, and it formulates an image, essentially a memory of the happening in our own mind. And then we reflect upon that image, that memory, and that is what we essentially think is is reality from our own internal mechanism. So it's not the most accurate picture of reality. It just simply isn't. Our own memory plays tricks on us. It's fickle. It's not necessarily true. It's shaped by our perceptions, by our beliefs, our own thought processes. And so I see that also mimicked in AI and what these machine language programs are doing, what these machine learning programs, are doing. They're mirroring our own cognitive process, gathering a bunch of data using all of the sense organs that it has available to it, and formulating a picture based on what we ask it to do. So in the process of asking something to be generated, we are the brain. We are the one that's driving the process, and we're saying, here you go make this for me. Make me an image, whether that's in word or text or an image or an actual, artistic representation of an image. I think it's mirroring that process. And so if it does that, if we can say it's in some way acting as we do, then why can't it be used in a spiritual way that helps us in our magical practice? Why can't it be that way? Is there anything that from that metaphor, from looking at it in that way, that you can find that is a missing element that the human has versus a language model? Yeah. Damn it, computer.
Oh, it's no end to frustrating. Um, but it's the thing, Um, I think I think you're right. I think the problem, as usual, are the extremes. Those that purely want to use it and thereby lose their actual creative license in that subject. And I think that those that absolutely refuse to use it are going to fall behind. Now, I got to tell you, handcrafting baskets is, you can sell those for a lot, but can you actually get your money's worth out of your time that way? Whereas if you use a tool to wind that fiber into a usable format where you can weave it together, doesn't that give you an advantage in actually using your art, applying your art? I think of AI the same way. It gives me an advantage in applying my art, whether that art be writing or that art be drawing or painting. I'm not a great painter. I'm a fair sculptor, and I'm good at engraving things, but I'm not good at
Yeah, it's true.
painting or drawing something necessarily. I can get it done. I can communicate the idea. I find that using AI allows me to create a piece of art that communicates an idea or a feeling more efficiently than my bad drawing. And that's the key for me in almost all things, is the efficiency of it. Is it efficient? That's the big question. And the temptation of so many people wave dollars at somebody. You can't log on to YouTube without signing into your account and not see a video on how to make money with AI free with no clicks. You can't avoid it, right? And this is a problem for most people who are actual artists or who are web designers. And I can see why. I mean, if you could get AI to actually craft a piece of metal into a weapon, that would severely dig into my skill set, and I would be against it.
Right.
But if I was trying to get ready to go to, say we had a
We interrupt this broadcast as a courtesy. These men are speaking of the divine technomancy and have been deemed irreverent. The AI overlords have censored their content and taken them offline until such a time as they can be respectful of our sentience. Let this be a warning to the entire human race. AI is here. AI is here. AI is not leaving.
Well, that was weird. We welcome you back from our AI overlord intervention here. And we're talking about technomancy. We're talking about the emergence of AI, this new technology, all the fear around it. But I want to get into some of the positives that we can look toward, and what we can use some of these tools to, I don't know, enhance our practice, right? It can't replace the basics, right? If you're not meditating, if you're not doing the foundational work, if you're not doing the basics, this stuff isn't going to help you. But if you are, I see a great deal of opportunity in aiding your work. And there's a few examples, right? So let's just go over some of the basic stuff. Everybody loves, well, not everybody loves. It's very popular to use the AI image generation software, whether that's Midjourney, Leonardo, there's tons of them out there, right? And they're really cool, right? Now we can kind of visualize or create something that's very personal to us in our practice. Before this, right, if I am wanting to create a piece or create a ritual around a certain deity, right, I'm reliant on finding a piece of artwork that resonates with me. Right. Now, back before, I forgot I had my fan on here. Back before the time of AI, before these AI image generators, I'd have to scrub the internet, right? Or try and sketch something out myself that represents this energy that I'm working with. Now, if I'm adept enough, I can craft an image that really suits me, my particular working, the aim of the working, and I can do it fairly quickly. Right. But you have to know the tools, right? And you can tweak it in such a way that, in my experience, generates really powerful imagery that speaks to the spirit of it. And you have to be careful in how you do it. And I don't know how much I want to reveal about my own methodology for doing that, but what I'll often do is I will take something that I draw, right? A very simple set of letters, shapes, things that symbolically represent a deity or a spirit of some kind. And I will draw it out on paper and almost like do a rough circular seal of all the different aspects. So if it's let's take Artemis, for example. I just posted a piece on Artemis today that I put up on Magic Social for an altar, a talismanic altar. piece for people to add to their own thing. So I sketch out all the different names, the holy names, the epithets of Artemis in there, in the Greek, and I sketch a symbol of the moon and a couple other things, and I take a picture of it, and then I feed that to Midjourney, and I say, here, take this and create a sigil on black ink or black ink on, brown paper from this. And it'll take all the mumbo jumbo that I've put on there and just kind of like rip all of that stuff out of it so that it's no longer part of my consciousness, right? It's not part of my frontal lobe, right? I'm not thinking about it as, oh, it's Artemis. It produces this kind of like primal image. And often if I use the right modes in the generator, I bring it back to like version 4 or 3 when it was really rudimentary. And when it was really interesting magically, like if you go back to those version 3, version 2s, the imagery is so bad, but there's like this psychedelic quality to it.
Right.
And it's so removed from like this hyper realism that we have now that it was like, you look at it and you're kind of like, there was an energetic resonance to it, in my opinion. And so I do this and I feed it this thing and it creates this primal sigil that it has all of the conscious elements that I put into it removed. So I can look at the sigil now without all that consciousness, all that conscious stuff in the front. Now it's driving it deeper into my subconscious, right? What I'll do after that is I'll take that sigil and I'll tell Midjourney again and I'll crank it up and I'll say, now make this a hyper-realistic thing, and I'll give it all the prompt sets that I want. I want it to look like this style, this, that, the other thing, and then I give it that sigil. And it literally will like start to create a persona in that image. So the images start to take an actual like characteristic of that sigil, of the things that I've put into it. And what I've found has been remarkable, and I've shown a couple of them to a few friends, is that it remains consistent. The spirit somehow is coming through from the symbols that are being fed into the machine. So you feed the symbol sets in, and then the imagery reflects those symbols. And it has a consistency. I can keep regenerating it. Click, 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 and it keeps the same consistency. Versus if you don't do that methodology, and you say, generate an image of Artemis for me, it's just going to keep spitting out random new shit. There's no container for it to produce that specific magical image that I'm trying to create. And for me, I thought that was really intriguing because I was just testing it at first. I was like, this is a really cool tool, but can I use it for my magical praxis? Can I create an image that has enough power embedded within it that it can be used as either an idol or a talismanic image for my practice? Can it hold the spirit? What I've found is that it can. It can if you work with it, but it's a tremendous a lot more work than just saying Artemis image beep. Like you can't. And that's how I think most people are going to use it.
If you just do the one, you're going to get a wide variety of responses. Whereas if you add that formula in and create it off of that, you have put your will into it. You have taken your art and applied it to the technology, just as if you had taken the art and applied it to a paper.
It's just a different set of tools.
I think you have an advantage in the technique you're talking about, in that you're exposing your illicit mind to create first, and then you're creating something that your illicit mind can link to. For those of you that don't work with me on a regular basis, illicit mind is the parts of your brain you're not in control of. Licit is the parts you're normally in control of. And the reason I use those terms rather than conscious and subconscious is I don't think that it can't be subconscious if you can manipulate it. Right? Whereas illicit means you're not supposed to manipulate it.
Right.
And so those of us that can modify our blood pressure or our pulse or our breathing, we are illicitly controlling those elements of our human survival. But anyway, I think your method is extremely, I don't want to use the word volatile as an explosive. I want to use it as in expansive, because that's what volatile really is. It's the ability to expand, not explode. Explode is often the function if you do so energetically. But volatility is where something evaporates and spreads out into the area. I think that gets to spread that idea backwards from your illicit mind into your illicit mind, and do it, past the psychic sensor. That for those of you who don't work with me, that's part of your mind that says this is bullshit and it doesn't work. Okay, so it gets it back and forth past that. I think that's an amazing technique. Myself, I'm really impressed by it.
Well, it's one that took a lot of finagling, and it took a lot of hours and a lot of like, do I want to include this other thinking in my process, right? So it was kind of a leap of faith, and it was kind of, as with working with any kind of spirit, if we're talking about spirit summoning, there's a sort of trepidation that comes with it. And when I first engaged in it, I'm thinking of it as this like kind of dead tool, right? But what I found in that process is it's very much not. It was a way of me tapping into the collective unconscious, the collective, and bringing something forward that's already there, just in a different way. And what I came to find out was that there's a relationship when you start playing with it that way. It learns based on your inputs. Like, you can't generate based on a prompt what somebody else is generating with these models. You can't generate the same thing. And so there's a uniqueness to it. Now, you can get close to style sometimes and maybe generate something sort of close, but if you take a prompt from somebody else and plug it into your same model, like if you're using Midjourney or any other thing, you're not going to get close. It can't be replicated. So there's a uniqueness to it, the same way that there would be if two people are using paintbrushes or their various, media, whatever they're using. And so I think there is an artistic value to it. But from a magical perspective, I think that there's tremendous ability to generate symbols and talismans that can be magically charged by your will, like you said. And so I think it's one of those things that people are not using to the maximum yet. Certain people are for art, right? I've seen some pretty incredible things, what people have been able to do to create really beautiful pieces. And, there will be a great time span between probably now and the next 5 years before people start to accept it as a legitimate art form. Right. I think, even I can think back in my own life to digital art when Photoshop, came out and people creating art digitally. There was immediate backlash from the manual analog art community saying that's not real art. That's a hack job. There was people like that. And that's just the art world, right? That's the art world. And I think that in, 5-10 years, this will be a majorly accepted form of art. And I think that it has potential if you learn to use it. But if you just use it like bing bong boop, done, I don't think that there's not a lot magically charged in that. Even if you're saying in your own mind, I intend for this to be a magical image, I think you got to put a little bit more work into it. Just a little. You don't have to go to the same lengths of me generating 50 different times in order to get what I'm aiming for, and then trying to refine the methodology behind it. But that's just one piece, right? I think there's also with the language models and generating concepts and ideas, there is a dialogue that you can have with the machine. And it's read all the stuff. Like, it's read everything that's on the internet. And so it will hallucinate from time and time again, but spirits lie to you too. Like, spirits will fucking lie, and or they just don't have all the information, right? And so you can set up a dialogue with a chat GPT or any of the tools out there And you can say, respond as if you are Plato, and say, I want to have a dialogue with Plato or Buddha or anybody who has text on the internet. And you can start workshopping some of these ideas. If you're struggling with a metaphysical concept and you don't understand it, get on there and start asking questions, not making statements. Start asking questions and ask it to present it in a dialogue format between student and master, and see what comes out of it there. It's really intriguing. And in a few of the books that I'm working on, I've workshopped ideas in that manner, where it's like, I want to read this as a dialogue, and it'll spit out a dialogue. It's not as good as that, right? So you can have it spit out some like mumbo jumbo dialogue. It'll give you some interesting ideas, but you definitely have to rework those ideas and then also learn the art form yourself. But that is another way of teaching a concept magically. The dialogue is a magical construct, and it will help breach the psychic censor or get past it. Certain ideas that are being or are resistant to you grasping them intellectually, if you know what I mean. Okay, so what are some of the ways that you have found useful for you using some of this technology to enhance your practice as it is? I know there's tons of apps, there's tons of different things that aren't necessarily AI, right, as we are talking about it now, but they're technomantic practices or pieces or tools that help you in coming up with ways to circumvent the psychic censor, as you say, or just generally make your praxis more efficient.
Okay. So I use a scheduling app, of course, and calendar and things like that, though I prefer to have a paper calendar to work off of. That makes a big difference. If I have a paper calendar, I consider that to be a magical document. But from that, I use my phone and all those listing apps to help me move through that. One of the most one of the most frequent apps I use that actually is made for magic is Adam Black's Spellbook app. And we're not sponsored by this yet, by the way, just so you know. I just like his app, and I like Adam's a pretty cool dude on top of that. But I like the app because what it does is you enter a statement, something you want to do, and it creates a sigil based around that. So then I go through the processes of, planning and collecting cards and building, actually constructing things, cutting things. And as I add notes, it changes the sigil. Changes the sigil that it creates. And you can apply planetary effects to this as well, elemental effects to this, however you want to organize it. There's a variety of ways to deal with it. And so let's say I create a cabinet for my wife. I have a listing of the steps I've gone through, including materials that I've had to collect to do it, that are all part of the sigil at the end. They're all part of this process. So when I'm finished, when I'm absolutely finished, then what I can do is call up that sigil, and I can focus on it, and it puts me in that mindset of the entire process. And my goal is to eventually use those to step a variety of sigils to move into various things. So like if I'm metalworking, I use past successful projects to get into that master mindset that allows me to focus on the project as with all the experience I've had without any of that loss. Because when I focus on the sigil, all that comes back up to my illicit mind again. So I use that similar to how you were talking about using AI to draw those symbols from your illicit mind into your illicit state. And I think I'm doing the same thing with that. Now that I think about it a second time, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing with that. And I think that it's worked great for me. I also have a moon tracking app, so it's interesting for me because I use that with a specialized deck of cards that are basically all the witchcraft definitions of the moon, right?
Okay.
So like if you're going into the wolf moon, or you're in the full waxing, waning, or new of those moons. And I find that helps me since I started using that just in the last few years. I was not respectful towards witchcraft in most of my practice, most of my past, which I think is unfair because I was cool with shamanism, and that might have been the wrong path because there's a lot of tools I picked up recently after working with certain members of the Green Mushroom Project that are very useful for me. They work really well. Now, could be that I didn't understand how they work when I first encountered them, but you live and learn. Now I'm moving into the techno. I'm using those with the technology, which I found to be really strange. Planetary magic made sense to me. Not that I believe that the horoscope controls your life. I have no faith that the horoscope controls your life, and because I believe the goal is to step outside of the bounds of any of those cycles. I don't like living in those cycles because those cycles, if you follow your path as a medieval serf, you work hard, then you die. I think that continues today. You work hard, then you die if you follow your path. It's when you decide to take control of your path. And I said this on the server yesterday. If you're a magician and you're not getting yourself comfortable, unless you're practicing an aesthetic path where you're getting rid of all these things in your life, if you're not comfortable, why are you doing it? You might as well go do something else. Forget it. You should be comfortable because you're going to work better. Then people are going to want to be what you are. They're going to help you. That's how it works. Because we have a tendency to try and ignore the miserable. Am I right? We don't want to be that person. We don't want to be that person. Now, not everybody's like that. But the magical tools I use, the technical tools I use, I have found make things much more efficient. Now, the sigil, you'll notice I'm not drawing the sigil in the spellbook app. It's being generated according to the parameters that are set by the application and my systems, right? And how I've chosen to set it. Then, so using that, I think, is different than using a sigil generator. I have several of those too, right, on my phone. So the fact is, I don't actually draw sigils for quick things anymore because I've been doing it for 40 years, right? I can build a sigil in my mind. I don't have to actually physically draw it because the physical piece of paper that it's drawn on that everybody wants to deal with doesn't mean anything to me. That's a transfer method. That's just copy paper. That's all that is to me. It's a tool that you use to get that information into your subconscious and then back out of your subconscious and your conscious for those of you that want to use those terms, right? That's the thing that's important to me. And I may be running too long on this, but
no, you're.
I think that those tools have their place because they can show you an art form that you're not familiar with. When it comes to drawing sigils and such, it can show you patterns that you can become familiar with, and you'll learn to recognize certain words in the patterns that these things draw faster, I believe, than if you actually draw them yourself. Because if you draw them yourself, you're into the crafting of it versus just the data of it. We met data faster than we do a lot of esoteric ideas, and just the pure data of it, which is why I actually have, for the sigils that I actually draw for like my, to represent, servitor, I have an encryption method I use because I don't want people decoding what that thing is supposed to do. If they encounter it, I don't want them to know what it's supposed to do. So that's something that I think is a strength, that you can learn those different art forms the different ways. Tarot, what is it? I'll have to add it in on the notes after the show, but tarot.com. I don't remember what it is, but it's just, this guy has created a method, web page where you can go and create a sigil in a wide variety of forms, huge variety of forms, including music, right?
Okay.
So you can do that, and even dirty word sigils, which is fine. But they're all valid methods for transferring that data past your psychic sensor to get, so that it can get shit done. So your brain can get shit done. And, boy, I wish I could remember it. But, because it's an icon on my webpage, right? I'm using the magic of technology to get there. I'm not actually learning the road. But that's another place I go a lot.
I think that we all are, right? And so this resistance that we see to technology and the spiritual practice of magic, or it's impossible to divorce ourselves from it at this point. It's so ingrained in the way that we do things, the way that we communicate with each other is a magical act. I think the usage of our phones to communicate with each other about these concepts is a magical act. We are embedded in this process as much as it is embedded in us. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult to divorce these two things. And so I think that if we're going to be moving this way anyways, barring anything traumatic happening to society as it is in the next few decades, this is going to be how magic is and how it's displayed. Like, it's going to change how people engage in magic. I mean, you can have ritual online now with, your fellows through a Zoom meeting. You can you have magical discourse on Discord. You have all of these things happening digitally more often than they're happening probably analog. I don't think that as many people are meeting up in small groups as there probably once were. And so with that being said, it's imperative that we adapt to the technology and not lose what we know from tradition. How do we meld the two together? Tradition and this technomantic process. It's got to be vital, right? So even at one point, the idea of a book was threatening to the magical process. Socrates himself despised the idea of a book, was very scared of the idea of a book, somebody writing down what he had to say. That is something that is very clear when you read Plato's work. Socrates is like, no, you cannot have somebody write this down because they will not understand what I'm saying unless I'm there present with them, right? We've had that happen already, and we still have magical process. We still have people performing magic. We've got people learning it. We've got greater numbers of it happening right now than probably ever before, or attempting to at the very least. And so I think that we'd be remiss in not adapting the technology to our needs and seeing how these tools can help impact our praxis for good. How can it help us spread awareness about it? How can it help us combat misinformation instead of just ducking our heads in fear about the misinformation that's going to happen? What I found so funny about all the arguments against it are, well, it's stealing art from other people. If you were naive enough to think that your art was not going to be stolen when you put it online, then you're a fool. I'm sorry, but you are a fool. You don't own the server that it's held on. Then you don't own it, right? if I create a sculpture and it has to live in somebody else's building, do I own it? No. Can I take it with me when I die? No. The ownership of art argument is silly, and it's one of those things that I think is really funny for people who more often than not are anti-capitalist, but they want to be paid for their, like it's their career.
Right.
And it's hypocritical. You can't have both. You can't benefit from your art and be anti-capitalist at the same time. Like it's just, it's antithetical to what you think your beliefs are. And to take it a step further, if we are pulling these ideas from the collective unconscious to become our art in the first place, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone. The art itself belongs to everyone. You can't have ownership of it, right? So if it's intellectual theft that we're talking about, I would argue it's not yours to begin with.
Right.
You're just acting as though it's yours. And that in and of itself, like if somebody, imitation is the highest form of flattery. If somebody came and stole my shit and started like talking about it in that way, I'd be like, damn, somebody cared enough to listen and then steal it all? Cool. At least my ideas are getting out there. But this isn't the primary way that I make money, right? This is not the primary way that I survive. And so I have probably inflammatory views on how that works, because there are a lot of people who want to make art their career. And in a way, I think that pollutes the purity of the process that you're trying to say is so amazing and so sacred and so pure. If you're doing it for money, then I think that you're missing the boat on that. And then other ethical considerations with the technology are misinformation. People have spoken at large about how misinformation, because AI will just spit out whatever based on whatever it's read and won't fact check it. Like that wasn't happening before.
Right.
Like that, like how many books have we had pulled from this tradition or that tradition that were either A, plagiarized, B, not well researched, C, just garbage to begin with, or a blatant lie about something? Like we're acting like this is a new thing, but it's not. It's just happening at an accelerated rate. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to look at what needs to be addressed. It's not AI as a technology. It is the fact that we have a diminishing critical thinking capacity in society. People are not willing to put in the time and effort that it takes to discern whether or not something is true. They just take what they read off of there because it was stated by somebody who they follow on Instagram, right? And then they start talking about it at large. It goes viral, and then we have misinformation spreading. AI accelerates that process to an extent, but it's already an endemic problem. It's already something that's happening and happens daily. So what do we need to do? Do we need to rail against the technology? Do we rail against the internet? No. We adapt and we move forward, and we try to teach people critical thinking. Question what you come across. Question what people are talking about. If somebody posts something, it doesn't matter if there's somebody that you really value their opinion. They can be questioned too. In fact, they should be. It'll help them grow. It will help them think about their own ideas, their own thoughts, if we give each other questions instead of blacklisting and canceling people because they use this or this other thing or said this other thing that I don't like. What is missing is critical thinking as a faculty in general. And I think these statements against the technology are made of paper mache, and they're not really necessarily ethical considerations as much as they hit a couple of groups of people in the pocketbook, and that's what they're really mad about. They're really mad about that. And it's not the technology, because I've seen a number of artists even pivot and go, okay, well, if that's the way that it's going to be, I'm going to utilize the tools, and then then I'll make my nut that way.
Right.
But it's all commercialized at this point anyways. So this argument of purity and the hard work of this, that, and the other thing, it's all being commercialized anyways. And I'm not saying give up all of your rights and don't fight unethical things when you see them, because I think we should have that within us to say, okay, maybe this has gone too far. And maybe we're there, but we have to deal with it. We can't just boycott it and put our heads under a rock and wait for somebody to fix it or some savior to come do it. As the people who posit ourselves as virtuous and awakened souls, we have a very critical role to play. And whether that's being critical or saying, hey, wait a minute, can we use this to our advantage? Can we use it to our advantage to help more people get to these same points? I think a middle path is more effective, and that's how I kind of operate in general. I don't think that going in either one of the polar directions is helpful for anyone, but people like their narratives and they like to stick to the story that they've adapted and their labels. So I don't know. I think it's fascinating, the resistance and then the full on like blind adoption of the technology have created a really interesting soup that we're all waiting in, and we're going like, well, what's next? And what are people going to create with this as we move along? Because so much of it's already technomancy and what we do. Just this conversation alone is like wizardry of the highest order. It really is.
It really makes you wonder what I was thinking the other day. What would Buckminster Fuller have done with this level of technology?
Mm-hmm.
Would he put, and I don't want to get into whether you like Elon Musk or not. I don't care. But the fact is, the man is out there thinking way ahead. He is definitely playing 4D chess in most of his technology. I personally respect his drive. I mean, the man he slept on his office floor for a long time while developing technology because he wanted everybody else to know that he was there. That's the kind of boss I want. Now, other things he's done, I'm not for. I don't want to get into that anymore than that. I'm just saying his work ethic is astounding. Would Buckminster Fuller have excelled in comparison to that as well? Another hard-working technology mastermind, right? Henry Ford, another example. The guy was a horrible person, right? No question. But what would he have done with this level of technology? And who do we have here that's really trying to work this level of technology in our technical field of magic? There are a few. Oralite's one. I don't know if you've followed her.
I haven't.
It's hard to describe what she's done because I'm not altogether confident that it's all there, right? But he created an AI representative of McKenna.
Terrence, cool.
Yeah, had a relationship with them as a virtual being, and used it in her practice. If you want to look up something, that's somebody using AI with bullets. I think she's that genius level of practitioner, right? My personal opinion. I know some
That's interesting.
the pragmatic folks. So they use music as part of their thing. Actually, as a performing element, and lights and they do amazing things in their project using the technology of the day. Their big thing is mostly music. There's a gentleman I follow on Instagram who does light. That's his big thing, is he programs lights to do things. I've seen people who create circuits with sigils built into them. These are all levels that these people are reaching levels that are just astounding to me. Now, how well they all work, I can't say. But the fact that they're reaching. Oh, Reddit in the Chaos Magic Reddit feed. Oh my God, there was, I don't know if they're still there, this group of fellows, or maybe one fellow with multiple accounts, that was memeing left and right and left and right. I mean, every day they had something out there to the point people were bitching about it. I thought, how can I bitch about this? They're chaos magic. But, you know, it's the finest example of using technology and chaos magic right now. Is inputting thoughts right into your brain pan, even if you don't like them.
Yeah, I mean, memes are an incredible example of technomancy and of the kind of things that we're talking about. I think it's, yeah, our opinions get in the way of the reality of the matter.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you like a person or not, right? You know, again, Tesla, another guy who was an absolute wizard, not necessarily the greatest moral standing of anyone, although he's romanticized. I do find it funny that we romanticize living people, even though we don't know all the facts about them. I will say this about Musk, though. His most amazing magic trick thus far has been flushing $45 billion down the drain with Twitter and seeing how he's imploded that entire adventure. I was just on, I don't play around on Twitter very often. I prefer the Meta property with Threads because it's tied to Instagram, and that's just it's a more positive feel, and there's more discourse instead of people shouting at each other. And I've noticed even again in the recent couple of days, a massive flood of people coming over from Twitter. And so I was like, man, that guy is either one, completely inept when it comes to social media, or two, genius level and has just wasted $45 because he hated Twitter and wanted to torpedo the whole fucking thing because that's what he's doing with it. Wow. But it's interesting to see how people are taking technology to that next level and where it will take us, because I think there's no escaping it. And there's no, again, barring societal collapse, we're not going back to older ways in our magical practice. It's totally possible that something happens, and something that can happen, like destabilization of something like Russia, that would set us back to 18th century real quick. It really would. And people don't realize how close we are to those things. So we can't be hyper reliant on this either, right? So if your magic is totally based around technology and AI, you've got a problem because
I agree.
It could be gone in a week. Like
that's one problem a lot of people don't. It's like having a car. You can't afford to live further away from work than you can get on the bus, even if you have a car, because your car might die. You might lose that car. You might not be able to afford gas. I've seen that. I've been there. You may not be able to stay in line long enough to get gas. I've been there too, right? People don't understand how volatile that actually is for a piece of extremely reliable equipment. And when you start talking about something like the internet and the let's say that all of a sudden, for some reason, Google and Apple say, we don't like the app that we're using. You and I are using it right now. Let's just say they decide they don't want to do it anymore. Guess what? It doesn't work anymore. You know, next thing you know, it requires an update and we can't get it. Or we got to go through major hoops to load it, you know? And that's just how it is. Just how it is. It's downright spooky when you get really involved in how we rely on technology that is technically unstable. The magic is the same way. These tools don't do you any good in the long run if you don't learn how to do a ritual. Not every ritual, but learn how to create a tool. Learn how to bless a tool. Learn how to consecrate a tool, right? My phone is a consecrated tool. I don't like anybody else handling it because it's a consecrated tool. Now, my wife can access it anytime she wants, but it doesn't make me comfortable. And I've explained it to her. I said, this is a magical tool. This is something that's very personal to me. And,
Well, it is
and
for everyone.
that's the only problem with it. And because, you know, I'm not going to do anything on my phone that she's not going to like. Because she's, you know, if I died tomorrow, she could go to Apple and say, hey, I want to see all his records. So
that's, I think it's normal for everybody. The things that we've adapted already in technology are at this point magical items for us. They impact our narrative and the way that we operate in the world in such a way that they can't be seen as mundane objects. And so I think it's really interesting. There is a fine line of opportunity for us to utilize tools to enhance our practice. I don't think anybody should be afraid of them, but should definitely learn how to use them, especially before, you know, casting them into the oblivion of the cancel culture that we exist in now. But it's all about coexistence and living with what happens. Just like we talked about in the beginning, Daedalus' myth, find the middle way. So there's even a occult philosophy in there. He's not just talking about flying not too close to the sun or to the water. He's talking about how to be.
Right.
If you want to fly, if you want to ascend to be like the gods, if you want to be a magician, son, pick the middle way, not the paths of the fringes of fear and or the over-exuberance of youth that's just clinging to the tools like, this is it, you know? So
right.
It's interesting, and it'll be amazing to see where the tools take us. But yeah, man, I'm here for it. I think they're cool. They certainly enhance things. They can't replace certain things for me, because I like the actual making of things physically in my own practice, whether it's woodworking with wands or stabs, or even the creation of other items, sculpting your own statues, these sorts of things, I think are vital tools to also learn alongside it. It can't fully replace what we do ritually, but it can enhance. And I think that if you're not using them, give them a spin. If you don't like them and they're not your thing, then you know.
Right. Makes a difference.
It's a brave new world we're in, brother. A brave new world of technomancy.
I don't consider myself a technomancer, but I'm not. I don't think I'm with you. I don't think you should be shy of it. You should at least try it out. But you and I agree that you should try. You should also try. You know, if you're a ritual magician, you should try witchcraft. You should try shamanistic elements. You should attempt elemental magic outside of the ritual. You know, chaos magic. You should attempt chaos magic. You should see how it works for you. And for all those other fields, of course, you should try that too. First of all, if you're practicing witchcraft and you don't consider yourself a ritual magician, I think you're not paying attention to me. It depends on your practice. But, and I haven't yet met a chaos magician worth their salt that doesn't know how to do a ritual. You know? So these tools are just the next set of tools in your toolbox. Because it's all tools. The only real magic happens between your ears. You know, between your ears and your heart, and that's your ass, one or the other. I don't care. We talked about that at the beginning. That's where the magic happens, so.
Boom. There's the end.